If you're looking for visionary conversations that push the boundaries of everything you thought you knew, welcome to Conversations Beyond the Cutting Edge, where every month, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandy Sedgbeer invites two leading authorities from distinctly different fields to engage in a deep dialogue focusing on the latest discoveries, information, and insights on some of today's most provocative metaphysical topics. Here's your host, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello, and welcome to part 2 of this conversation beyond the cutting edge. Consultant naturopathic physician, author, teacher, publisher, and energy and consciousness researcher Penny Kelly and quantum plant alchemist Davyd Farrell share their experiences and knowledge about the role of nature in our collective evolution, the quantum intelligence of plants and elementals that coexist with us, and the ancient wisdom, spiritual truths, and practical steps that can help us restore our sacred bond with the earth. Penny Kelly, Davyd Farrell, welcome back.
Good to be here.
So let's talk about food, the stuff of life, one of the stuffs of life, food and nutrition. Penny, you had at one point, long before you became a naturopathic physician, severe rheumatoid arthritis, and you embarked on a path to heal yourself.
Yep.
And one of the things that you discovered on that journey was that the food supply in first world countries has little or no nutrition in it. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, we have depleted the soil. Most people think that soil is just something for roots to stand up in or hold the plant up in. And, that is so far from the reality that it's really a sad state of affairs. For 100 years now, the soil has been losing minerals and losing life. When you spray pesticides, which are heavy-duty poisons, held stable by heavy metals, because heavy-duty poisons are very volatile, and they need something like heavy metals to keep them stable until you get them on the plant. Same with fungicides, same with herbicides. Pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides are sprayed liberally. And in our vineyards, we were told we couldn't walk in the vineyard after spraying for like 4 or 5 days. And my attitude was, what? And we're going to eat this stuff? Something's not right here. So I began, partly because of my relationship with the elves on my farm and the plant life itself and the critters. And I started to research and study soil. And I think the work that is seminal, nobody has done anything better or more important or more critical than Weston Price, the dentist from Cleveland back in the early 1900s. And that work that was an eye-opener in terms of nutrition and what happens when you don't have nutrition. And so we started to restore the soil on our farm, and that was remineralizing and restoring life. We became biodynamic farmers and permaculture, did a little bit of permaculture as well. The difference is astounding. So we had a garden this last year, and we had a tragedy in our garden. We had like 30 days of rain and a broken tiller. We usually would till and keep the weeds down. So we weren't able to till, and it kept raining. Those weeds are like 10 feet tall. They're like a small forest that you can get lost in. Most weeds are 2 feet high, 3 feet high. Not these. They are astounding. And we're looking at the weeds. We had to declare one end of the garden a loss. And yet at the same time, we were saying, wow, that soil is something else, because it will produce enough growth to be like 3 times greater than what it should. All of the soil is critical. And if the minerals aren't in the soil, the fruit, whatever it is, whether it's a vegetable, a fruit, or a grain, is not going to be able to pick up those minerals. And so when you eat it, it's empty. There's nothing in the food. And your body does all this work, uses its own resources and its own supplies to break down that food in order to extract the nutrition, and there's nothing in it. So you go downhill as you eat more and more food with no nutrition. You exhaust all of your supplies in the body, and pretty soon inflammation sets in without certain frequencies. The microbiome is destroyed. That destroys everything else. The gut, the immune system is no longer functional. Down the road, it leads to dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all sorts of birth defects. And you can see now the children being born now, that's way too many shots.
Too many, too soon. Yeah.
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 And they don't have the resources to balance those shots. And what happens is they end up with ADD, ADHD, autism. What is that? That is the absence of all of the collective consciousness that should live in the gut and manage your body for you. So I had to reverse all of that, and I did. And it was some work, and it took some time, and I haven't had, that was severe rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, really severe. And I was only 40 at the time. So for 30 years, I've had no problems.
So, Davyd, here's an interesting thing. I mean, Penny was talking about the rain and weeds. Weeds are plants too. What do we do in a situation like that? Because a lot of people, they don't want the weeds there. How can we feed the nutrition back into the soil without then having to damage the weeds, to kill them?
Well, I think these are really interesting points. And Penny touched on many things there, which I think are probably important to consider. So I'm just going to take a look back to some of those and then perhaps answer that question in the course of doing that. But that many herbalists have always said that whatever medicines we need for our system, for us to be strong and healthy, probably are going to be grown within 10 to 15 meters of our recognized living space, which for most people is going to be their garden. So you'll know this, Penny. And so I've for a long time had a practice when I move into a new house of not touching the garden, which I love gardening, I love plants, of not touching the garden for at least the first 6 months, maybe even a year if I can manage to go that long.
Okay.
And what I do then is I allow the garden to show me what is in the soil already. And so I did that in the new house we're in. And for the first couple of months, there wasn't an awful lot because it had been very hot here. The ground was dry. I let the garden start to grow back and 3 major plants appear. First of all, it's dandelion, mainly because I called it, because I love dandelion medicine. I take it all the time. Secondly, 2 other plants grew en masse. The first is henbit and the second is false mallow. And not plants that I've known and behold, they were plants that will absolutely help me with my ongoing healing process from my broken feet earlier this year. And Penny's going to know all of this, but I'm just reiterating it because I believe it's so true, is that if we stop to see plants not as weeds, but actually as medicinal helpers, both for our physical body, but also in the garden, we really don't want to pull those plants up. And if we do, we're going to do it in a sacred way, which is, hey, I want to make some medicine with you, which is going to heal me, is going to heal my family, is going to heal my friends. And this is where we get into this co-creative arrangement with nature. So where we ask the medicine, we ask the plant, is it okay for me to harvest you? I want to make this. I won't remove all of you. I'm going to, like nettle is the classic example. Most people want to get, they're amazing for the garden. They're amazing for meditation. They're amazing for lots of things. They're an adaptogen. And so maybe you don't want a whole garden full of nettles, but you can talk to a nettle spirit and say, hey, let's create a patch over here where it's really good for you to be so that your energy can be with all of the other intelligences in the garden. And I always used to have this agreement with all the medicine plants, indeed all the beings in my gardens, is like, there is only enough space for us all to be here. I do not want any of you, even my favorites, and you're all my favorites, taking over. So we all have to find a way to live together. And what I would always find is after the first year is the garden would start to self-organize itself. And all I would have to do is be the guardian overseeing all of this. And sometimes having to have a little conversation here or a little conversation, hey, Mugwort, I know you love to be the queen and the star of the show, but you always dominate the flower bed. And you've also, by the way, overtaken some of the other plants. So we need to trim you back, let those guys grow. Everybody can be happy again. And so it sounds a little bit whimsical, but I found that it works. And in doing so, we also learned that our gut flora is directly connected to the microbiomes in the soil, which is how the garden actually grows the medicines that we need, because it's communicating with our stomach at a quantum level and saying, hey, what does Davyd need? Oh, well, Davyd could do with this, this, and this, and his family could do with this and this. So by quantum entanglement, they'll grow. And once we start to use all of these very simple mechanisms, we come back to, I think, the questions you asked in the first show, Sandy, which is how do we communicate with plants and nature and get a response? These are the ways that I learned in 3D to start getting validatory responses back, which then open the doors in my multidimensional awareness to much bigger conversation. Yeah, I don't think that's specifically about food, but I wanted to share it because I think...
Back to food in a minute, because you've just answered another question, which was really about how do we start reconnecting with the natural world and form a deeper and more meaningful relationship. Both of you have just answered it. Going back to food, let's talk about the energetic essence, the consciousness, and how the person preparing the food or anything that we interact with, really, the consciousness of that is going to impact us.
Our consciousness of food is dependent on the frequencies in that food. Frequency is consciousness. That's a little hard for some people to get their mind around. But when the frequency isn't there, like for instance, if you have a biodynamic squash and you have a regular store-bought squash, and you take the juice from that biodynamic squash and you drip that onto a spinning fiber plate, what you get is this amazing series of concentric circles and structures, and it looks like a starburst in a mandala. If you do that same thing with the store-bought squash and you drip that onto that a similar spinning plate, you might get one or two flat, simple rings. And what you understand when you look at that is this squash, this store-bought squash, doesn't have the frequencies in it to build the structures that really nurture the whole human body. And that's true of all the foods. When you look at some of the work of some biodynamic researchers, when you drip the juice of an apple onto a fiber plate that's spinning, what you get is this array of designs that looks just like your apple orchard. The trees, the leaves, the flowers, the fruits, the grasses under the tree. It's amazing. It's a huge difference. And then you get nothing from, apples that have been sprayed with poison. So what we, I think, need to understand is food is frequency. That's what we're trying to get when we eat, is to take in those frequencies and set up a resonance within the system. And that resonance is really what pulls every cell has this is a cell, and this is the North Pole, and this is the South Pole. And when that gets out of alignment, that's a diseased cell. So what you do when you eat these frequencies is you pull that cell back into alignment, because this is the axis by which it picks up communication. If it's pointing in the wrong direction, it cannot communicate. So food is really wonderful in many ways, but a lot of stuff people are eating is dead, absolutely dead. And after a very short time, so is the individual who's eating it.
So it's not just the soil we're growing it in, it's the way it's being prepared, it's people's attitudes and consciousness, all the way on the plate, and the attitude of the person eating it.
Yeah, when I used to make bread, big, like 16 loaves at a time, always when you're doing that final kneading, you're putting energy into that bread that says, I'm asking you to structure yourself to heal whoever has even one bite of this bread. Thank you, thank you. And people would come and say, what is in that bread? That stuff is amazing. And yeah, we just don't think about what we don't cook. Nobody cooks anymore. I mean, a few of us do.
Davyd, I'm sure you've got lots to add to that.
Yeah, just making notes. And again, so many wonderful points there, Penny. I'm just wondering where to dive into. Following on the theme of food, as somebody who loves food, who loves to cook, and has lived in many parts of the world, lived in many great food cultures, in India, in Italy, in Mexico even, and maybe not so much Britain, but, many other foodie nations of the world, you get to appreciate that good food is not always made in the most fanciest of restaurants. I have to be honest and say that some of the best food I ever ate in India is in a place that you would probably never think that you would maybe even go to the toilet into, never mind get food from. And yet, whenever there was a queue of local people queuing to get food, I would always go to those places when I lived in India, and I tried the food there, and I found consistently that it was always so good, so tasty, because it had been made with fresh ingredients by people who cared about the food that they were making, and they were selling it for next to nothing, and it tasted 10 times better than the food that was being served up in the 5-star hotel 2 miles down the road. And so I kind of learned to get past my very Western programming of like, hey, you shouldn't eat food from these places. There were definitely some places that I would like, my body medicine tells me don't eat from there. And the other places, like my eyes would tell me don't eat from there, but my body medicine would say, hey, go and try the food from there. And I learned to trust my gut, particularly when it comes to food.
Yeah.
Right? And, I think that when we're preparing food, exactly as Penny said, even if it's simple food, we've been programmed in the West to get our food from the local metro supermarket, get it home, wang it in the microwave for 30 seconds, booyaka, you've got your dinner, all within the space of like 15 minutes from the moment you left your office to the moment you got the food on the table. And it's like, as Penny said, that food, it may as well be like reheated cardboard because it's got the same nutritional value, right? Why have we got used to that? Well, we've been told that time is money. Not that time is art, which is a lot of what myself and my partner Bella teach about from the Mayan perspective, that time is art. And when we remove the needs to project ourselves into the future, I've got to get this done by this time because then this is going to happen. Or, oh my God, this has just happened and now I can't deal with anything because I'm completely cooked by it. Once we remove all of those perceptions of the past and the future, we come into the moment. So the only important thing is, hey, I'm cooking a really beautiful dinner right now for myself and my partner and my family, and I want them to get the best benefit from it. So in that way, even if the quality of the food maybe that you've bought or the product is not amazing, by amplifying the energy of the food, you can actually raise its vibration, which, I use a pendulum to do this. I do it with intention. And I also learned that when I was making flower essences that I would test at the end, how much of this essence has the intelligence of the plant? Oh, it's like 85%, let's just say. Is there a way for me to increase that by calling in the intelligence of the plant? Absolutely. So I started to boost what was already naturally given from the plant in nature. And I would always get it up to 99%. There would always be like 1%, which is me because I'm the maker of the essence. And so it's difficult to remove fully myself. But 99%, I think, is a pretty good benchmark. And so the plants taught me this also. They said you can always increase the energetic value of something just with your awareness and intention, and by calling the qualities of the apple, the tomato, the rice into the food and putting it into the food with love and then preparing it with love. So there are many different ways that we can override the bad programming of the shitty food, sorry, my French, in the Western world that we have, particularly in the United States, where I perceive that most of the food is kind of poisonous in nature, unfortunately. And this is, again, where I loop back to something I shared in the previous episode we did, Sandy, about alchemizing internally those toxins, which does require meditation and it requires the help of plants. But if you do that all the time, eventually your body gets into the mindset of detoxifying itself. It's part of your body-mind medicine. So I use these as examples of ways of not being defeatist. Hey, I can't do any of these things because I live in the city or I only have these options. It's like, no, there are always solutions to raise the frequency of what you're doing.
As you're talking, something has come into my mind that most people have heard of, but don't even think about it in this context. And that is the law of similars, which is, homeopathy and tissue salts, etc. This is what you're talking about. If we are unconscious and angry or depressed, miserable, we're putting that into the food. We're creating a similarity right there. And if we could just think about everything we do, emotions are at the bottom of many illnesses and diseases. If we could think about, if I'm going to be like this, then look at what I'm going to get. I need to change how I'm thinking and being.
Yeah. Oh, there's no other way, to use what David was just saying, than to be present. Be present to what you're doing and what you're feeling and what you're, what's your goal. Don't be mindless. So, yeah.
It's like, it's kind of the internal programming that we've been given. It's like, I don't really have time to nourish myself properly. I don't really have time to cook food for myself properly. I don't love myself enough to actually want to do that for myself. When you bring it back to that, you're just like, oh my God, like what's the programming that's gone in there that is making me think that's okay? What, so this is where the mindfulness aspect of the new frequency that we are in is going to be so important that humans understand really quickly. Because if we're still carrying the old paradigm frequencies with us that tell us this self-affirming, I don't have time for this food is shit, I'm not going to receive anything good from it, then what's going to happen? We're going to reaffirm that. Whereas if we say, hey, I do have time to buy the ingredients, to even grow the ingredients, to treat them with care, to thank them, to thank all of the beings that grew the food, all of that then goes into the food, and the potency of the food is going to become so high. I actually think that we're going to end up eating a lot less in the future, because we might only need to have a little Star Trek-esque little cube of something so ram-packed with good stuff that we won't need to eat a big dinner. And I think that's also how we're probably going to move beyond the need for the majority of people to eat meat. As somebody who was a vegetarian for a long time and then had to switch back, I understand that this is a very emotive topic for many people. But in my heart, I feel that nature is going to provide us facsimile food as a transition that is going to help those people transition away from eating protein in that way. So again, nature is this incredible mirror to what we need. And if we say to nature, actually, we want to move away from this whole kind of cattle meat industry, and we want to move into something that's more sustainable, but keeps people healthy and fresh and vibrant, then by quantum default, Mother Nature is going to respond to that, and she's going to bring new plants through. Or maybe we're going to discover new fruits and vegetables that were always in front of us, but we had just never tried before. Who knows? I think that we're only limited by our belief systems, to be honest.
I heard from somebody once that in Germany, a lot of the farms, a lot of the farms, it wasn't about growing more and becoming a big supplier. It was about growing enough to feed my community. So people shopped at the local farm, and all the farmer, wanted was to support that. I mean, we used to have this, in England in the old days when you had a corner shop probably every 4 or 5 streets, and that corner shop was the hub for the community, and someone else was the hub for another community. Do you see us returning to a time like that when we will just be feeding and caring for what is immediately around us? Because if you go back to Western price, eating food that is grown locally is really important too.
Yeah. It is. I'm going to say that there are factors in food. For instance, when you are growing a garden and you're walking back and forth, weeding those plants or feeding those plants or watering or whatever, that plant is busy attending to what does your energy need. And the natural purpose of plants is to feed and heal humans. And so they change their chemistry to fit what you need. So when you have, you're getting your oranges and grapefruit from Chile, and you're getting your potatoes from Canada, and you're getting, everything from everywhere, you're getting there are built-in factors called paciferins. Those paciferins will protect you from staph and strep bacteria that are specific to your region. There's a whole range of strains of staph and strep, and paciferins from your region are in your food and protect you against the strep and staph in your region. And there are auxones as well. Auxones in the food are specific elements that help you get absolutely every drop of nutrition from the vitamins, minerals, and aminos in that food. And that's what you need. Those auxones are going to be there to help you absorb what you need for your climate. So if you're in a hot climate, you'll stay cool. If you're in a cold climate, you'll stay warm. And we don't take any of that into account. We're shipping food all over the place, and we're getting the benefit here in Michigan of somebody who's growing stuff down in Ecuador or Peru, and it's like, dang, I'm freezing. What's wrong? Well, what's wrong is you're not getting the benefit of the nutrients and the forms of nutrient that you need in your climate.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what, Penny, what you said there, I think is so spot on. And it's like if we eat seasonally and if we eat locally, then we're going to
Yes.
be eating what our environment understands we need, which is, for example,
Right.
why we have lots of squashes in the winter, because our body needs that kind of starchy, heavy material. It's why we get
Yeah.
lots of salads in the summer, because we don't need that
That's
heavy
right.
duty food to keep us warm. And the same is true whether it's for food plants, whether it's true for medicinal plants. I know that there are many people out there, and I've even had to change my view on this quite a bit over the last few years, is that we are moving to a much more planetary, unified consciousness. It's already happening, it's already underway, and it's going to accelerate increasingly in the coming days, weeks, and months of 25. It's all very much underway, and whether we're ready for AI, whether we're ready for crypto, it's going to happen. For sure, up until 12 months ago, I was very reserved about all of this, but I do see that if we have positive thought and intention, everything in our environment can actually assist quantum medicine, etc., etc., etc. But if we're so busy rejecting the mechanism that's going to bring that into play, it's going to be difficult for that to happen. So I think we've got this transition phase where we're going to go through amazing technological inventions coming from the quantum space, but at the same time, we're going to come back to a much more localized focus, which is keeping it present, keeping it in the moment. And that's how we're going to transcend our layers of consciousness. And I think, as Penny said, you know, why are we eating avocados from Ecuador in the depths of winter in Canada or the Northern Hemisphere or Britain? It's like, you know, our bodies can't even absorb that kind of food, much as I love avocados. But you know what I can absorb? I can absorb chestnuts, I can absorb elderberries, I can absorb squash, all of which I need. And one of the things that I learned living in Italy, exactly what you said, was that there were many what they would call peasant farmers, but actually biodynamic farmers in Tuscany. And most of the people around us went and got their produce directly from their agriturismo or their biodynamic local farm, and they bought direct they that had been pulled out of the ground. When I lived in Goa in India, I went shopping once with one of my friends, and I went to get some frozen shrimps from the refrigerator, and he was horrified. So, what are you doing? We don't eat that. I'm like, it's just to put in the fridge in case we don't have any. No, we put them back. I'm going to take you down to the harbour right now. And we're going to get fresh shrimp straight out of the water. So we, and I said, like, is this how you guys eat? He said, us Goans absolutely refuse to eat any type of fish that hasn't just come out of the water fresh, whether it's shrimp, whether it's tilapia, whatever the fish might be. And I said, well, what do you do during the monsoon season when you're not allowed to go fishing? Because in Goa, they can't go fishing for 2 months. He said, we use all the money that we've made from you tourists in the rest of the year to buy fish in other parts of India.
All right. Sandy, let me just add that I think we're moving to community-based everything, mostly as a way of surviving. And that may be something that is off in the distance a little bit, but it's coming. And we are finding the value of discovering one another and who's next door and who's in town, you know, where are the farms, etc.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's what we're going to be talking about after this break.
Welcome to Om Times TV.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times' flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor, and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees, and no BS, just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios, and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo, and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Everything that we do, we can do in a contemplative manner. Through the art of contemplation, you can use the gene keys in a really powerful way. Gene keys is basically the code book of life. In the gene keys, the book is made up of these 3 levels: shadows, gifts, and siddhis. And the journey is through those 3 levels, kind of unpicking of the shadow states, the releasing of the gifts, and then the embodying of this higher consciousness called the siddhi. And the siddhis are very exalted words. And it's not like we kind of suddenly are all these exalted Christ-like beings, but we have flashes and illuminations along the journey. And the more we get stuck into the journey, the more illumination comes to us, because the more we're releasing the light from in these codes inside our DNA. So all those revelations are inside us. So the contemplative way is the inner way.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
You're listening to Conversations Beyond the Cutting Edge. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and my guest this month, a consultant naturopathic physician, author, teacher, publisher, and energy and consciousness researcher, Penny Kelly, and quantum plant alchemist Davyd Farrell. And we're talking about the mystical and practical aspects of our connection between us and the natural world. Still to come, activating our dormant DNA, becoming cosmic humans, and what the future looks like. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Penny Kelly, Davyd Farrell. Few would argue that we and our planet are in transition. Both of you have been addressing this in your own recent endeavours, the work that you've been doing. Davyd, with your website, quantumplanet.world, which offers a guide to living on a new Earth, as well as plant immersion retreats and courses. And Penny, with your book, The Revival, A Path to a New Earth, New Human. Davyd, let me ask you first, where do you think we are heading?
Well, this is where I find the work that we've been doing, working with the nature of time, to be really important, because when we understand that where we're heading is where we are and where we've already been, we understand that we're living in a fractal time universe. And one of the major things I think that we're going to have to go through is letting go of the contrived 1260 old paradigm, Julius Caesar, Gregorian tax-related system of the Anunnaki ancestors that broke time and actually did exactly what Penny said earlier when she was using the diagram of the pen, which is the 24-degree tilt that we were knocked off. Mother Earth was actually knocked off her true orientation, which is why we have this 24-degree split between sidereal, as above, so below, what's in the sky above astrology, and Western tropical astrology. And we've been going through an ongoing inquiry, myself and Bella, with our tribe over the last year, of saying, well, why are we using a system that doesn't match what we see in the skies? Our ancestors would never have done that. They wouldn't even have been able to perceive of it. So why are we doing that? And then when we looped it back, we came back to 2,000 years ago, which is when this split happened, because there was a point where tropical Western astrology and sidereal were actually at the same point. And so we've been pondering this question and seeing through our own work that when we are in this mindset of 9 to 5, I work for somebody else, they pay my wages, I pay my insurance, I pay my taxes, where is the space for us to cook? Where is the space for us to garden? Where is the space for self-nourishment? It's not there, because we've been enslaved to a whole different system, which is conscious and deliberate. And unfortunately, humanity is now at the very threshold of realizing all of this, and they're going to have to go through a process of seeing all of this and accepting. People like the three of us, I imagine, have already understood and seen this a long time ago, as indeed I'm sure many of your viewers will. But even we are having to accept new information. It's like, oh my God, like our history was completely fragmented and stitched back together with the use of off-planet technology that's given us this linear time of set situations that we perceive to be our history, which we have no idea about, because all we have is a bunch of information that we've received from somewhere, which is never a good way of understanding anything. If we've used the last 4 years as a mechanism, say, hey, if I believed all the stuff you told me over the last 4 years, my understanding of this part of history would also be completely different. So I think in terms of where we're going, it's massive wake up time. It's like, we can talk about food and being present, but until we actually open ourselves up to the reality that we've been forced to live in and have accepted, we're going to be stuck in this slightly off kilter kind of, we can say, angle. But from what I've been seeing in my own meditations and my own journeys is that everything has already been taken care of. We already made the jump. We already cleared up the astral planes of all of the horrible cartel mafia bosses that were there. They've all been removed, and all that remains now is what's left in the individual's field. And that means having to go inside, uncover the truth of their own nature, uncover the truth of their own lives, even go back through their lives, doing very Don Juan Castaneda kind of recapitulation work, and start to understand, oh my God, who am I? If we're trying to get validation from a savior on the TV, a savior in politics, or a big inventor, then we could be sat for a very long time wondering why our life isn't really going anywhere. But certainly what we've seen is the more that we go inwards, the more that we work with the Mayan time technology, the more that we start to see that every single minute of every single day fits into a much bigger collective fractal tableau or gestalt, we can say. And from that perspective, well, then the whole reality starts to look different, and we have more time to do all of the other beautiful things that we've been talking about here today, which is to become more present, to work with the plants, who really, I think, are the bridge between our mundane reality and our multidimensional true nature.
Yes.
Penny, your book, The Revival, A Path to a New Earth, New Human, you wrote that to help us walk the path to that new world. Hopefully, you say, a fourth dimensional system. So how does a fourth dimensional system look and function from your perspective?
It's similar to this system. We're in a 3D system. A 4D is also physical. However, there are subtle differences in the consciousness and the commitment to ethics, and that makes all the difference in the world. When you move from D to 4D, for example, the 3D attitude in making a deal, for instance, is, okay, I win, you lose. Everybody's always trying to get more out of the deal, and we kind of pride ourselves foolishly on having screwed somebody and gotten a better deal than we gave. And that goes away. That's if the deal is not really good for both sides, that it's not a fourth dimensional deal. Another thing is that we use things and then we construct things to throw them away in order to keep the economy going. And so I think that the difference there is that we begin to construct things in such a way that we use the consciousness of the materials to help with the self-organizing properties of that material in order to make it last and make it work. And so we don't have the amount of waste there's tremendous amount of waste that we produce. And for what? What are we doing? Davyd was talking earlier about some trees that were cut down and him looking at like, what? Why? We just mindlessly put stuff, get the stuff out of the way, bulldoze it, blow it up, destroy it, change the river. Why does a river always snake with these frequencies? It's because the water, if it's going to stay living water, has to move in such a way that as it moves down the river, it spirals and it keeps itself in the river channel by digging out its own pathway. You straighten it out and it floods. Boom. There's so much engineering that is done in the 4D and especially in a 5D system that is absolutely stunningly beneficial. All the walls, all the windows, all the sources of energy nurture the continuous, what I'll call realignment in the body of the humans, the plants, and the animals in our 3D system. Everything is destructive. The frequencies coming off the internet, the frequencies from electricity, the frequencies from our lights, from LEDs, the lack of frequencies in the food, everything takes us down. In a 4D, 5D system, everything restores. And so there's so many, I mean, I've pages of notes on the differences between 3D, 4D, and 5D. And some of them are really subtle, but they're critical. So, yeah, war is only defense, absolutely only defense. And when you get up into some of the higher systems, people, they know how to disappear themselves so that they don't have to fight. They're not interested in fighting, not for any reason. So, yeah, those are some of the differences.
Many commentators say that our software is being upgraded through multiple frequencies coming onto our dormant DNA. So I'd like both of you to talk about that. So, Davyd, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. And I also just want to concur with much of what Penny just said there about the 4D. And I spent a lot of time also in meditation, journey work with plants, mapping out 5D, even 6, 7, and 8, so as to be able to try and explain it, because it's often beyond words. And even I understood going back to Buddhist school, they had difficulty explaining it too. And I would ask them questions which they could only try to repeat from a Buddhist perspective. And it used to wind me up. So it's like, but I've heard about this from these Western esoteric schools, and now I'm trying to match them across systems. And in the end, I mostly got confused. And so what I understood was that in the West, we are lacking the navigational tools, which is why so much of what we do on QPW has this idea of the quantum compass, a navigation guide to quantum consciousness, because we see the internal world as a series of dials, and we can say quantum mechanisms that allow us to split our attention, to have our consciousness in different levels or layers of consciousness in different places at once, in different timelines. And once we start to do this, we're already consciously accepting that we're multidimensional beings. And so when people say to me, how do I know if I'm communicating with my 4D or my 5D self? I said, it's very easy. Our 4D body is very much our emotional body. So if you just got triggered by somebody, you're getting triggered in your lower 4D emotional body, which happens to most of us. If you have an intuitive thought, then you're communicating more with your 5D, 6D higher self mind. And so you're communicating. So actually, we're communicating with those aspects of ourself all day, every day. But we've been so programmed out of that we just ignore it and go, I'm not going to believe my psychic vision or my intuition because that's somehow going to be inconvenient for everybody else. And so what we've done is we've learned to edit ourselves by what the herd mentality wants us to do. And we're not strong enough to say, hey, I don't want to do that. That doesn't work for me. So, to come back to this idea that Penny was talking about, it's like biomimicry. If we look at how the river flows, we see these incredible things that it wants to move with the energy of the land, of the dragons, of the telluric currents. And so in our wisdom, we're like, that can't be right. Let's make it a straight canal. Oh my God, why is it just flooded the whole entire landscape? Or, this, you might remember this, Sandy, back maybe 10, 15 years ago, lots of the rivers were flooding. And so they had this great idea, let's dredge the rivers because it must be the buildup of silt that somehow has accumulated that is creating this. Now, the insurance companies are going nuts because they're having to pay out huge bills. What was the real reason? Well, there was a very smart George Monbiot, I think was the guy, the journalist that pulled up this particular piece of information. And he said, actually, if we look at the upland farming practices that are being sponsored by the EU into mono agriculture, encouraging us to rip out the trees, well, then we might start to understand why we're having all of these mudslides into the river, which is the real reason they're silting up. So I just use that as an example to kind of highlight what Penny said, because when we isolate our attention into one place, very reductionist Western scientific thinking, we ignore the rest of the medicine, the rest of nature, the rest of the plant. I see this for plant medicine too, particularly with some of the sacred teacher plants like cannabis, for example. The scientists are so busy taking the plant apart, trying to work out what does it do and isolating different components for the latest round of gummies, they haven't bothered to consider that the plant is a medicine in its whole. And that actually, if we just let the plant do all of its work, we might be able to receive all of its medicine. So I think we're kind of struck with the genetic imprint of idiocy sometimes. It's just like, why not just let nature do its thing, and we might be able to learn from it, rather than, like you said, Sandy, taking this arrogant attitude that I know better because I'm human, and I have a much bigger mind, or I've been programmed to believe that, than a simple dandelion plant or the energy of Mother Earth or of a river. Then we end up with all of these problems that sadly we're now having to experience firsthand, and people are getting angry about. It's like, oh, why has an earthquake just happened next to my house? Maybe because you live in an earthquake zone? Maybe, I don't know.
Duh.
Yeah, we have to wake up in quantum intelligence. And once we do that, I think we're going to find that our reality is going to self-organize in a different way. And I think we're actually going to see a lot of people moving very, very soon, relocating themselves on the planet. And I think there are many reasons why that might happen. I'm sure Penny's probably seen a few in her look-sees too. But I do believe that we're naturally going to want to go back to a place where our body feels more aligned with the earth that we walk on. So I think all of this BS about immigration and stuff, I think it's all going to fall away quite soon, because once we level the playing field with universal wealth systems, then there isn't really any need for all of this immigration, and people will want to go back to their mineral-rich countries. Mexico is the perfect example. Probably should be one of the richest resource countries in the world. Why isn't it? It's being raped and pillaged because of all of this kind of stupid mindset that we have, which is let's keep digging things out and selling them in unrecyclable ways. So it's a radical mindset shift that humanity is going to have to go through to make the new earth jump, because it's a different type of frequency, as Penny said, that once we get into more higher 40, 50, we simply don't want to behave in these unethical ways, because it doesn't make any sense to us, because it's not actually logical. So exciting times, right, Penny, wouldn't you say? I think
Very exciting, challenging, inspiring. We have it all on our plate this next few years. And I think it's really important for us to say, woohoo, bring it. You know, let's play with this.
So I want to come back to that question about, us being upgraded, through multiple frequencies. I mean,
yeah.
people talk about these frequencies coming from the sun, coming from the solar flares, but these frequencies are also coming from the earth, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they must be coming from the plants too, and the elemental.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. So it becomes, as one of us raises our frequency, then the others are naturally going to raise
Yeah. Let me just share that DNA responds to frequency. So things turn on and off based on the frequencies you're exposed to. So when let's say you change one little frequency, well, you can't, because now that's interacting with a whole bunch of others. And so your DNA begins to, we'll use the term upgrade. And when somebody or something deliberately exposes you to a higher set of frequencies, you'll maybe do a partial take the first time or two or even three, but it begins to work on you. And the more you respond to the frequencies that you were exposed to, the more you change. And the upgrade is a slow but steady process. And as you change, so do the plants, the plants, the earth, the tree, everything. It's all us. It's all one system. And so it all changes together. And I remember talking to the planet, this is a long time ago, and I said, well, what do you dream about? Because I was dealing with dreams. And Mother Earth said, my dream is that you guys will evolve far enough to take me with you into that new world. And I was like, what? Yeah. What? And that has stayed with me for like 25 years. And that really is the fact that it's all one system. And there are versions or iterations of self, iterations of being for everything. Plants, animals, trees, flowers, fruit, air, water, Mother Earth, planets, suns, and so on. So you can exist at any one of those levels, but once you start discovering the great joys and the greater smoothness and the lack of violence, or the absence, a great lessening of violence in 4D and 5D and above, this place is not quite as attractive, but we don't want to leave all the plants and trees and flowers and butterflies and what have you behind. So the whole thing has to go with us.
So we have about 5 minutes left. And Penny, You have an ebook, Reality is a Joint Venture. You give 17 pointers for creating a new earth. We can't
Yeah.
go into all of these.
Oh.
What I would like you both to do in this last 5 minutes is give our viewers some pointers of what we can do to
Oh.
start, this journey to creating a new earth, becoming a new human.
Okay, I'll start. Davyd, you to speak up, because it's been so long since I wrote that book. I don't remember exactly what I said. However, I do know that the first thing, if you're going to move into a higher dimension of being, create a new earth, you have to go inside. The reality that we have is the result of the consciousness that we hold. If you're trying to create a new earth and you haven't done the work, that you're going to end up with the same old crap. And so going inside is really, really important. And then the second thing I would say, and then I'll turn it over to Davyd, is that you really have to be present to what is. You have to be out of the illusions. You have to be out of the narratives. You have to be away from the propaganda. You have to be looking at the world with this cool eye that says, what's really going on? What's really happening in medicine, in education, in science, in art, in music? What's really happening in agriculture? What's going on in government? What about science, technology? When you can look at all of that and see what is it I love and what is it that we need to correct, you can begin to think about a new earth and creating something different.
Well
Thank
said,
you.
Penny. I don't know what I can add to that, really, other than, yeah, having been in the spiritual space for a long time and sat in many ceremonies, retreats with people, I often saw the same things over and over again. Everybody wants to be spiritual and wants to be ascended. Nobody really wants to do the work to get there, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
after living under a very, very powerful yew tree for 7 years and being literally turned inside out by that tree every single day, doing medicine work most days, dieting with plants most days, being taken across the threshold and death more than once and coming back, I learned to basically let go of myself. I let go of the identity of this Davyd. It serves a purpose for these kinds of calls. But what I can say is that when I started to really go inwards, working strongly with particularly plants like dandelion, I have to be honest, who I asked to show me how to repair my DNA. And he showed me not only how to repair my DNA, but what my DNA actually consisted of. And lo and behold, my DNA was consisted of lots of extraterrestrial beings, all other aspects of Davyd, all living their own lives in other star systems, but still living in this one with me and causing me some trouble, I have to say, in some places. But once I started to separate my attachment out from myself by doing the inwards work, by seeing how much I was lying to myself, how much I blindsided myself, how much I had rejected parts of myself, how much I didn't love myself. Once I started to do all of that, started to do more conscious soul retrieval work, repair work, with the heartfelt prayer, hey, creative source, great spirit, I want to be as whole as I possibly can be. I'm going to show up every goddamn single day and answer that call, bring it on and keep bringing it on until I'm done. That process started a while back and has only really come to conclusion this year after I had that fall and had to cross the veil of death and come back and let go of myself completely and allow myself to accept my cosmic human self. But as Penny said, it requires us all not to sit on a Tibetan cushion in a cave for weeks or years. I don't think that that's really right now, but we can sit in the comfort of our own home with a small candle or a flame, maybe just in meditation, maybe with breath work, maybe working with different types of plant medicines or essences with clear intentions. If your intention is, I want to heal, then accept that whatever shows up for you is going to be part of the healing process. If you don't want to heal, don't set that intention. But, we're in a time where we have to be brave, we have to be courageous. But if we are, we will find that spirit rewards us in ways we can't even begin to imagine or describe because they've never happened to us before. And that is the gift that spirit gives all of us by showing up in this human experiment. So I would say it's a rallying call to keep strong, keep working forwards, and keep asking for help. There are many, many beings, as I'm sure Penny will agree with, who are here to help us, both on the planet, the nature spirits, the plants, but there is also a lot of our galactic ancestry that is sat right off planet and actually guiding us through this process right now. We can't see them with our own 3D eyes, most of us, but if you go into the internal meditation space, they are right there and they're willing to communicate with us at all times. So very, very present right now.
Okay.
So
1 minute each on what will people find on your websites that will help them dream this future into being.
Okay. I have classes, I have books, and all of my books are written from the point of view of let me teach you what this journey is like, how it feels, the kinds of doubts, the kinds of ahas, and the kinds of conclusions that you might want to experiment with your own life. And then I teach classes, I do all kinds of interviews. I love people. I'm here to teach the world about the mind and consciousness. And so when people say, well, what are you doing? I tell them, that's what I'm doing. I'm teaching about the mind and consciousness and also ways to get healthy. Because once you start going inside, what are you going to run into? You're going to run into your body immediately. It's a body-mind system. And when you're not healthy, you can't hold that higher consciousness. So those are the main things on my website.
And I highly recommend your book, The Revival, because in that book,
Yeah.
you will begin to confront yourself.
Yeah.
You will begin to learn,
Yeah.
who you are, what belief systems you've taken on board that you need to get rid of, and how we can move forward. Davyd, what will people find at your website that will help them?
I would hope much the same as they'll find at Penny's, but maybe with a different kind of an emphasis. We're also big believers in, we're not here to heal you. You have to do the healing work yourself. But what we can offer you is a few signposts on the journeys that we have taken using particularly the Mayan time technology to re-establish a different time wave that we live in, which is fractal spiral time, working with plant medicines. But also I want to bring in, if you really want to understand your own inner DNA, start looking at your stellar nation's cosmology of fixed stars through your natal birth chart. I did a lot of meditational work working with my fixed star astrology, which is what actually activated all of my DNA with the help of dandelion and a few other plants. And I started to have experiences of my soul and other star systems. So this is what is available on our QPW website. We're also doing this Heaven on Earth right now, where we're working through the internal compass of the elements. If you don't have your air, fire, water, earth, and ether in balance internally, then you're not able to access Christ consciousness, because you need to have your horizontal plane balanced, and then you need to work on your vertical plane, your world tree, your tree of life, your chakra system. So, all of these tools are there for people to use. And as we said, and as Penny said, it's really just a signpost from the journeys that we've taken and through the shows that we put out to help other people not have the same experience as us, because that wouldn't necessarily be useful, but to have an experience that is appropriate for them in a similar way as part of their own individual and collective evolution.
Penny Kelly, Davyd Farrell, thank you so much for the work you're doing and for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us today. It's been a real treat.
Sandy, it's been a pleasure as always.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And Happy New Year.
Thank you. Yes, the year of endings and beginnings, for sure.
Yeah, right. Oh.
Yeah. So for more information about Penny Kelly's books, events, workshops, and services, visit pennykelly.com. And for more information on everything that Davyd has been sharing and is doing, visit quantumplanet.world. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer. I'll be back next month with 2 more episodes of another riveting conversation beyond the cutting edge. I hope you'll join me then.